Hi everyone, and welcome to day one of the 7-day stretch challenge. Now, as I mentioned in my previous video, this is going to be ideal for anyone who's sitting at their desks all day, because of course sitting down causes a lot of tightness and muscle imbalances even at the best of times. But of course, since lockdown, many of you have been working from home at workstations, of course, not set up properly. So for example, your dining room table, or just sitting on your sofa, for instance. So stretching is obviously going to be really good at alleviating that tightness. And of course, if you do a lot of sport and exercise, you're going to get a tightness in a lot of these areas as well. So it's also going to be equally beneficial to you. So I want this to be nice and interactive. I want to try and do something positive and get people engaged as much as possible, because of course at the minute, with the second lockdown and everything, people are probably going to be lacking the motivation to train on their own. But if we put a positive spin on it, it's obviously going to be a good thing to perhaps do a bit of stretching, which is something that a lot of people don't do enough of. So therefore it's a good opportunity to focus on your weaknesses. As I mentioned as well, I'm also going to be doing a £20 gift voucher in my prize draw at the end of the lockdown. So what you have to do in order to be in a chance of winning is essentially do this 7-day challenge on 7 consecutive days. So you don't have to do it on the day that it starts, because obviously that will disadvantage people who only come across these videos later on. But from the day that you start, you have to do it on 7 consecutive days. And to let me know that you're doing it, you have to like each video, and you also have to comment on the video to let me know how you get on. It doesn't have to be an essay or anything, just a sentence or something will do. Just tell me how you found the stretches and everything, and just to try and encourage people and motivate other people to do the same. So they're the 2 things that you have to do for each day, so like and comment. But also it would be great if you could support my business and increase the amount of people that see the videos by sharing, and also perhaps tagging some of your friends in your comments also, just to try and reach as many people as we possibly can. So before we get started, I just want to start with a quick disclaimer, because obviously these stretches are aimed at anyone who doesn't have any medical conditions or injuries that may contraindicate participation. If you do have one of those, then please obviously do seek advice before you take part. But otherwise, I hope you enjoy the series. So the first area that we're going to work on today is a common area that gets tight when sitting, which is around the hip flexors. But we're also going to have a look into the IT band as well, which is of course a tendon that runs down the side of your thigh, which gets tight, as I mentioned before, in runners because of tightness and weakness around the glutes and hip flexors. So for example, the TFL muscle, which is a hip flexor muscle, and also an abductor of the leg, that gets quite tight through sitting, so it's going to get quite short and potentially put some strain down that IT band. Also, if the glutes are inactive, then that's going to aggravate the issue as well, because the IT band joins into the glute area. So this is just going to be 3 or 4 stretches a day, targeting different areas. So in order to stretch the IT band, a good one that I like to do is essentially we take the leg that we want to stretch and we put it behind our other leg like so. So we're crossing our legs over. If you do struggle to balance a bit in this position, then of course feel free to hold on to a piece of wall or something like that, okay? And then essentially we're going to move the hip away from us, okay? So essentially we're going to take our left leg and therefore move our left hip away, and you should be able to feel that sort of down the IT band quite nicely. And also if you're quite tight in the oblique muscles, you might feel it in those left obliques as well, okay? And because this is a static stretch, we want to hold it for at least 60 seconds. Now, a problem that a lot of people have with stretching is that they don't hold it for long enough. Sometimes they only hold it for about 10-15 seconds, which if we're looking to improve our flexibility just isn't enough. Okay, so we're going to hold it really for as long as we can, but for at least a minute. Now you can even divide that up a little bit, so you could do 3 by 20 seconds or 2 by 30 seconds if you wanted to, but as long as you're reaching at least a minute, then that should be fine. And then of course we'll swap over and do the other side. So we're going to take our right leg behind left and then move our right hip away, so we're almost tilting like so. So we're bending through the left obliques and lengthening through our right oblique muscles. Okay, so a lot of you are tight around the IT band, particularly those of you in the past who have suffered from runner's knee will find this, I'm sure, particularly beneficial. Okay, and then we're going to come out of that. So the next stretch we're going to do is going to target the hip flexors. Now the basic stretch that I like to give people is we can use our wall, or we can just put our hands on the back of our office chair, something like that. We're going to take the leg that we're going to stretch, so in this case it's the right leg. We're going to take a big step back, so we're into a lunge. We don't want our heel on the floor because otherwise that's going to become a calf stretch, so we want to be on our toes and forefoot. And then essentially what we're going to do is we're just going to bend this back knee and lower ourselves down. So we're essentially going into a lunge position, and obviously as we lower you might have to adjust the position of your other leg as well to make it a bit more comfortable. But as we come down, we want to feel it in that hip flexor. Now a lot of people I find tend to lunge a bit more sort of like this, so they sort of go down with their hip just in that extended position rather than that hyperextended position. But the problem is if our thigh's not coming back behind us, so we're not hyperextending this hip, we're not going to get the stretch in our hip flexors. So I would always do a lunge sort of like this rather than just like that. Okay, so also we want to make sure that we're doing good lunging technique as well, because as I mentioned in the past, we want our knee to be tracking over towards the outside of the foot, so we don't want it to be collapsing in and having this sort of knock knee movement. Okay, so we want to help our glutes out a bit, help them to activate by staying knee over the outer foot. Okay, so we'll hold that again for at least a minute and then we'll swap over to the other side. If we want to have something a bit more challenging than that though, we can get down onto our exercise mat, and essentially we're going to be in a very similar position as you can see, so we want that knee hyperextended. Now some of you may feel a good stretch just in this position. However, we're going to increase the stretch if we want to by squeezing this glute muscle. So stretching the right leg, we squeeze the right glute, and then what that's going to do, it's going to change the position of the pelvis very slightly. So it's going to encourage that sort of not quite a posterior tilt, but sort of going back into that neutral position. And then of course that's going to increase the stretch in the hip flexor. So it's something we know as reciprocal inhibition. So essentially what we're doing is by squeezing one muscle and contracting it and shortening it, in this case the glute, we're increasing the stretch in the opposite muscle, which is the hip flexor. Okay, and then obviously we can keep increasing that by sort of moving forward like so. Now if we wanted to increase that even further and do a slightly different technique, then we can do. So many of you have probably heard of a technique called PNF stretching, which stands for proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. So it's not as complicated as it sounds though, so don't worry. So essentially what we're doing is we're increasing the stretch by using muscle contractions. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a muscle contraction of the hip flexor. So we're already doing our reciprocal inhibition by squeezing our glute muscle and encouraging that pelvis to tilt backwards. But essentially what we're going to do, we're going to do an isometric contraction of the hip flexor. So isometric meaning no movement. So essentially what we're going to try and do is we're trying to bring the knee forward like this, but of course no movement's going to take place because the floor's blocking us. So we're trying to move up like that. So we're essentially going to be pushing against the resistance of the floor. We're going to do that for about 6 seconds at about 20 to 30% of what we'd say our maximum effort is. So it's quite a gentle contraction really. Okay, so we're just going to gently contract for that 6 seconds. You should really feel it sort of stretching quite intensely. Then we're going to relax, take a nice deep breath in and out, and then we're going to move slightly further forwards. Okay, and then we can hold for a few seconds, and then we can do that again. So we're doing another 6-second contraction. So again, I'm going to do that. And then relax, take a nice deep breath in and out, and then we move forward. So we can do up to 3 contractions essentially. So you don't have to do 3. If you get to 2, I've just done 2 and I feel like I'm sort of approaching my limit on this stretch, then that's fine, just stay with 2. But once you've done your final contraction, then you just hold that position for 20 seconds, okay? And then obviously I won't do that, but you get the idea. Okay, so there are your stretches for today. So we're getting into the hip flexors and the IT bands and sort of outer quadriceps, so Vastus Lateralis muscle. So as I mentioned at the start, do comment, like, tell me how you got on, share it to your friends, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 2.